The rain poured mercilessly that evening, the kind that made even the rich hurry for shelter. But not her. She stood by the side of the road, her thin shawl soaked, clutching a basket of wilting roses. Her trembling lips whispered, "Please, just one flower. It'll help feed my son tonight." Cars passed, splashing muddy water at her feet, and still, she smiled, not because she was okay, but because she had no other choice. And inside a black luxury car nearby, a man watched her silently. His face was unreadable, but his eyes carried something deeper than pity. He was one of the city's most successful businessmen, Michael Grant. But in that moment, as he watched that fragile woman stand in the cold rain, something inside him cracked open. He didn't know her name yet. He didn't know her story. But what he saw in her eyes would change his life forever. The clock on the car's dashboard blinked 8:43 p.m. Michael had just finished a long day of meetings. His assistant was still talking through the phone, reminding him of tomorrow's charity event. But his mind wasn't on work anymore. He couldn't take his eyes off that woman by the bus stop. Her small basket was nearly empty. Only a few crushed flowers remained. She looked exhausted, her hands red from the cold, her shoes soaked through. Yet every time someone walked past, she still managed to say softly, "Please, sir, buy one for your loved one." For a moment, Michael hesitated. He had seen beggars before, sellers, street kids. But something about this woman's quiet dignity stopped him. She wasn't begging. She was trying so hard to hold on to a little bit of hope. He rolled down his window slightly. "Hey, miss," he called out. She turned, startled. Rain dripped from her lashes as she tried to smile. "Yes, sir? Would you like to buy a flower?" she asked, her voice trembling. Michael looked at her carefully. "How much for all of them?" Her eyes widened. "All of them?" she stammered. "Sir, they're just old roses. I can give them cheap." He stepped out of the car, letting the rain hit his tailored suit. "Name your price," he said gently. She shook her head, confused. "Sir, I can't charge much." They're worth more than you think," he interrupted softly. He handed her a $100 bill. Her hand froze midair. "Sir, that's too much," she whispered, glancing around. "I can't take that. I just need enough for dinner for my son." Michael looked her in the eyes. "Then buy him something warm. And keep the rest." For the first time that night, her lips trembled into a real smile, fragile but full of gratitude. "Thank you, sir." "Thank you so much," she said, her voice breaking. He nodded once, got back in his car, and drove off. But as his car disappeared into the rain, he couldn't shake the image of that woman, her wet hair plastered to her face, her eyes tired but kind. Something told him her story wasn't just about poverty. There was pain, loss, and something hidden behind that brave smile. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He sat by the window of his penthouse, the city lights glimmering below. His mind replayed her voice. "I just need enough for dinner for my son." He had everything, success, a mansion, a name people respected. Yet somehow he felt emptier than she did. He thought about his late wife, who used to sell handmade jewelry before he made his fortune. Maybe that's why the woman's eyes haunted him. The next morning, as the city woke up, Michael made a decision, one that would soon make headlines and touch hearts far beyond his own world. He was going to find that woman again. The morning sun rose over the city, but for Michael Grant, the light brought no peace. His mind was restless. All night he had wondered, who was that woman? Why was someone like her, with such quiet strength, standing in the rain selling flowers at that hour? He didn't even know her name, just her face, tired, soaked, but radiant with a kind of grace you couldn't fake. By 8 a.m., he was already in his car again, retracing the road from last night. The rain had stopped, leaving puddles and broken petals scattered on the street. The bus stop was empty. Her spot was gone, as if she had vanished into thin air. He asked around. Vendors, taxi drivers, even the woman who ran the bakery nearby. Finally, an old newspaper seller pointed him toward a small alley behind the market. "You mean the flower lady?" "Yeah, she comes sometimes. Lives somewhere near Old Pine Street with her little boy." "Thank you," Michael said, slipping him a bill before heading that way. Old Pine Street was a world apart from his glass tower office downtown. The air smelled of damp wood and frying oil. Small, crooked houses lined the road, laundry fluttering from their rooftops. Kids ran barefoot through puddles, laughing. And then he saw her again. She was sitting on a wooden crate outside a tiny apartment, mending the strap of her basket with a piece of wire. A little boy, maybe 6 years old, sat beside her, drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick. Michael's heart softened instantly. He parked a few feet away, unsure how to approach. When she noticed him, her eyes widened. Recognition flickered, then confusion. "Sir, you again?" she asked, standing quickly, brushing her damp skirt. Michael smiled gently. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced. I wanted to check if you and your son were doing okay." She looked stunned. "Oh, you didn't have to do that. We're fine, sir. Your kindness last night helped us eat." He nodded. "I'm glad. But I was wondering if you'd let me buy more flowers from you today. Maybe all of them again." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Sir, I don't have many left. And honestly, they're not fresh." Michael stepped closer. "It's not about the flowers. It's about you. You remind me of someone I once loved." Her expression softened but remained cautious. "That's kind of you to say, sir. But I'm just a mother trying to make ends meet. Nothing special." He crouched to the boy's level. "What's your name, champ?" The little boy smiled shyly. "Eli? That's a strong name," Michael said warmly. "You helping your mom sell flowers?" Eli nodded proudly. "Yes. I help her count the money. We're saving for school." Michael's throat tightened. The boy's innocence reminded him of his own childhood, when his family had struggled before he built his empire. He stood and reached into his jacket. "I want to help," he said softly. "Maybe I could hire you, miss, to supply flowers to my company. We host many events. You'd earn more and your boy could go to school." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Sir, you don't even know me. Why would you do that?" "Because everyone deserves a chance," he replied. "And something tells me you've earned it." Tears filled her eyes as she looked down, her lips trembling. "You're the first person who said that to me in years." She hesitated, then whispered, "My name is Grace, Grace Porter." Michael extended his hand. "It's nice to finally meet you, Grace." Over the next few days, Michael arranged everything. Grace would deliver fresh flowers weekly to his offices. He even connected her with a supplier to get better stock. Slowly, Grace began to earn more than she had in months. Each morning, she arrived with a smile and a humble bouquet. The staff adored her. She was kind, soft-spoken, and always grateful. And Michael found himself looking forward to her visits more than he cared to admit. Yet, something about her still felt hidden, like a shadow in her eyes that appeared whenever someone mentioned her past. And one evening, as she was leaving the building, he finally asked, "Grace, where's Eli's father?" Her face froze. The question hit her like a wave. She lowered her eyes and whispered, "Gone, sir. Long ago, and I'd rather not talk about him." Michael's chest tightened. He saw the pain flicker in her eyes, deep, quiet, and raw. But he respected her silence. Still, something told him her story was far from over. Because sometimes people who seem broken are simply hiding pieces of a past, too heavy to share. Weeks passed, and Michael found himself thinking of Grace more often than he intended. She wasn't like anyone he knew in his polished, business-driven world. There was a softness about her that disarmed him, a quiet strength that made her beautiful in a way success never could. Every Friday, she came to his office with Eli. They brought roses, lilies, and laughter that filled the sterile hallways with warmth. Even his staff began to adore them. One afternoon, as Michael walked Grace and Eli to the elevator, Eli tugged at his sleeve. "Mr. Michael, do you have kids?" the boy asked innocently. Michael smiled faintly. "I used to, buddy. But my wife and baby, they passed away a few years ago." Grace froze beside him. Her face fell and she whispered softly, "I'm so sorry." He nodded quietly. "That's why I stopped believing in second chances. Till I met you two." Her eyes glistened, but she said nothing. Something about his words seemed to stir something deep inside her, a guilt she couldn't voice. That night, as Grace and Eli returned home, the small apartment felt heavier than usual. Eli had fallen asleep on the couch, his arms wrapped around his worn-out teddy bear. Grace sat by the window, staring at the city lights. She couldn't stop thinking about Michael. His kindness, his loneliness, the way he looked at her with quiet understanding. But every time she thought of him, her heart twisted with fear, because there was something he didn't know, something she had buried for years. Grace whispered to herself, her voice trembling. "You can't find out, not him. Not now." She reached into an old wooden box under her bed, pulling out a faded photograph, a picture of a younger Grace, smiling beside a man in a suit. The man's face was unmistakable. He was Michael's younger brother, David Grant. Years ago, before Michael became the billionaire everyone admired, his brother David had been the rebel of the family, wild, charming, and full of life. Grace had met him when she was only 23, working at a small flower shop. David swept her off her feet with promises of forever. They married in secret, against his family's wishes. Michael, always the responsible one, had tried to stop him. "She's not after your money," David had argued. "She's the only one who sees me for who I am." But tragedy followed fast. David got involved in a failed business scheme, borrowed money from the wrong people, and disappeared one night, leaving Grace alone and pregnant. She had tried to reach out to Michael then, desperate for help, but his assistant had turned her away. "Mr. Grant doesn't want to discuss family matters," they'd said. She had walked away, humiliated and heartbroken, vowing never to return, until fate, cruel and ironic, brought them together again under the rain. The next morning, Grace tried to act normal as she delivered flowers to Michael's office, but her hands trembled. She avoided his eyes. Michael noticed immediately. "Grace, are you all right? You look pale." "I'm fine," she lied. "Just tired. Eli's been coughing lately." "Then take the day off," he said kindly. "I'll send a doctor over to check on him." She froze. "No. Please don't," she blurted out too quickly. Michael frowned. "Grace, I just want to help." She forced a smile. "I know, sir. But we'll be fine. Really." She turned to leave, clutching her basket tightly. As she stepped out of his office, Michael couldn't shake the unease settling in his gut. Why did she seem so scared? Why did her kindness feel wrapped in walls of secrets? Later that night, curiosity gnawed at him. He asked his assistant, "Can you look up a background report on Grace Porter? Just to make sure she's safe?" It wasn't mistrust, it was concern. Or at least, that's what he told himself. But when the file arrived the next morning, his heart stopped. The report was brief but shocking. Grace Porter, formerly Grace Dawson, married to David Grant, deceased, Michael's brother. The woman he had been helping, the woman who had slowly begun to mean something to him, was his late brother's widow. And Eli was his nephew. Michael dropped the file onto his desk, his hands shaking. Memories of David came rushing back. The arguments, the regret, the funeral. He whispered to himself, "All this time." She never said a word. Anger warred with empathy inside him. Was she using him? Or had she been too ashamed to tell the truth? He didn't know what hurt more, the lie she'd kept, or the realization that fate had brought them back together for a reason he wasn't ready to face. As he stared out the window, the city lights blurred through his tears. Everything between them had changed. Michael didn't sleep that night. The revelation clawed at his chest like a secret that refused to be buried. Grace, the woman he had started to care for, the woman who'd brought light into his empty life, was his late brother's wife. And the little boy who called him Mr. Michael was his own flesh and blood. He sat by the window, staring at the city skyline that suddenly felt so hollow. Every memory of Grace's shy smiles, her trembling gratitude, her quiet eyes, now played back like a puzzle he hadn't realized he was solving. By dawn, he made up his mind. He couldn't pretend he didn't know. He needed to hear the truth from her lips. When Grace arrived that morning with her basket of fresh lilies, she noticed the tension immediately. The receptionist avoided her gaze. The air in the office felt heavy. Michael's door was slightly open. She peeked in nervously. "Sir, you wanted to see me?" He looked up from behind his desk. His usual calm was gone, replaced by something cold and wounded. "Close the door, Grace." She did, her hands trembling. "Sit," he said quietly. She hesitated, then obeyed. The silence stretched painfully long before he finally spoke. "Grace Dawson," he said slowly, eyes locked on her face. "Or should I say Grace Grant?" The color drained from her face. The name hung in the air like thunder before lightning. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. You found out, she whispered. Michael leaned forward, voice low and trembling. You looked me in the eyes every day knowing who I was. Knowing who you were. Why didn't you tell me? Tears welled in her eyes instantly. Because I didn't want to destroy what little peace you had left, she said, her voice breaking. You hated David for how he lived, for the pain he caused your family. I was part of that pain. Michael clenched his jaw. Grace, you think lying to me made it better? I wasn't lying, she said desperately. I was surviving. She rose to her feet, tears streaming down her face. After David died, I had no one. I came to your office once, years ago, begging for help, but they turned me away. I was humiliated. You had no reason to remember me then. I was just the woman your brother left behind. Her voice shook with years of buried grief. So I worked. I sold flowers. I did everything I could to feed Eli. When you found me that night in the rain, I didn't even know what to say. You were kind, and I didn't want that kindness to disappear the moment you learned the truth. Michael looked away, struggling to breathe through the storm inside him. Grace's voice softened. I was scared, Michael. Not because of your anger, but because I didn't want Eli to be punished for the mistakes of the past. He finally looked up, eyes full of pain. Do you really think I'd punish a child for something his father did? Grace stepped closer. You might not mean to, but the world does. The Grant name has power and shame. I didn't want Eli to grow up under either. For a moment, silence filled the room, the kind that carries the weight of everything unspoken. Michael ran a hand through his hair, sighing deeply. You should have trusted me. Grace wiped her tears, her voice trembling but resolute. I wanted to, but I didn't know how. She turned to leave, but Michael stopped her. Wait, he said softly. One question. She paused at the door. Did you ever love him? My brother? Grace froze. Her shoulders tensed as she whispered, I did. Once, but love doesn't always survive mistakes. She turned, meeting his eyes. He left me broken, and I swore I'd never depend on another man again. Michael's voice was low, almost a whisper. Then why didn't you hate me for being his brother? Because you're nothing like him, she said simply. Her words hit him like sunlight breaking through clouds, painful, blinding, but pure. She left quietly, the door closing behind her. Michael sat there for a long time, staring at the empty space she'd just filled with truth. For the first time in years, he didn't feel angry. He just felt dead for her pain, for his brother's mistakes, for the years they both lost to pride and silence. That evening, he drove aimlessly through the city until he found himself back near Old Pine Street. Through the window of a dimly lit apartment, he saw Grace reading to Eli, her face tired but peaceful. He parked across the street and watched them, mother and son, surviving together against all odds, and something in him shifted. The anger melted into something deeper, something sacred, because in that moment Michael realized that family wasn't defined by blood alone. It was built by those who stayed, who sacrificed, who loved even when the world turned cold. He whispered to himself, voice thick with emotion. Maybe it's not too late, for any of us, but fate still had one more test waiting, one that would push his newfound faith to its breaking point. 2 weeks passed. Michael hadn't spoken to Grace since that painful confrontation. She'd stopped delivering flowers to his company. Her absence left the office strangely quiet, as if even the air had grown heavier. He told himself to move on, to forget. But he couldn't. Every morning he found himself reaching for the small vase on his desk, the one that used to hold Grace's flowers. It stood empty now, like his life before she appeared. One rainy afternoon, just like the night he first met her, Michael decided he couldn't let it end this way. He needed to see her again, not as a businessman, not as a Grant, but as a man who had finally learned what compassion truly meant. When he reached Old Pine Street, the narrow lane was flooded. Kids splashed barefoot through puddles, laughing. But as he neared Grace's building, his heart sank. Her door was wide open. Inside, the small apartment was in chaos. Boxes half-packed, clothes on the floor, and on the table a letter. He picked it up with trembling hands. Mr. Michael, by the time you read this, Eli and I will be gone. Please don't worry. We're safe. You've done more for us than I can ever repay. I only hope you understand why I had to leave. The truth changed everything, and I don't want Eli to grow up under the shadow of the past. He deserves a fresh start, somewhere no one knows our story. Thank you for seeing me as more than my mistakes. You showed me kindness when I thought the world had none left. I'll never forget you." Grace Michael's throat closed. He looked around the tiny apartment, the place that had once held so much quiet love, and felt a sharp ache in his chest. He turned toward the window, and that's when he saw her across the street. Under the gray sky, Grace was helping Eli into an old bus. She froze when she saw him. Their eyes met through the rain. Michael didn't hesitate. He splashed through the puddles toward her. "Grace, wait!" She turned, tears already glistening in her eyes. "Michael, please, don't make this harder." He stopped in front of her, breathless. "You don't have to run." "Not for me," she shook her head. "You don't understand. People talk. If they find out who Eli is, they'll drag your brother's name through the mud again. Can't let that happen." Michael stepped closer. "Grace, I don't care about gossip. I care about doing what's right, for him, for you." Her voice trembled. "And what is right, Michael? You have a life, a world that doesn't belong to people like us." He took her hands gently. "Then maybe that world needs to change." She stared at him, stunned, unsure if she could believe him. Michael knelt before Eli, his voice soft. "Hey, buddy, you know what your mom told me once? That you're saving for school. How about we make that happen together?" Eli's eyes lit up. "Really?" Michael smiled through tears. "Really? 'Cause I'm your uncle, Eli. And family takes care of each other." Grace gasped quietly, covering her mouth. Her tears fell freely now. You'd really claim him, even after everything?" He nodded. "David made mistakes, but you and Eli don't deserve to pay for them. I won't let you struggle alone anymore." The bus driver honked impatiently, but Grace no longer cared. She dropped her bag and stepped into Michael's arms. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to cry, not from pain but from release. Michael held her tightly, whispering, "You've carried the world on your shoulders long enough. Let someone carry you for a while." Rain poured around them, washing away the years of silence, shame, and hurt. It felt like the sky itself was blessing the moment, two broken souls finding light in each other's forgiveness. Eli tugged at Grace's coat and said, smiling, "Mom, does that mean we're staying?" Grace looked up at Michael, her voice shaking but certain. "If he truly wants us to," Michael smiled softly. "I don't just want you to stay. I need you to." Months later, Grace and Eli moved into a small house near the park, one that Michael had quietly renovated himself. She started her own flower boutique, Grace Blooms, with Michael as her first investor. Business flourished. Every Sunday, the three of them visited the same spot where they'd first met, the corner where she once stood selling flowers in the rain. Only now she brought fresh bouquets to give away to strangers who looked like they needed hope. "Why do you do that, Mom?" Eli asked one afternoon. She smiled, handing a flower to an old woman passing by. "Because once someone did it for me." Michael watched her, his eyes warm with admiration. "Grace, you've changed my life more than you know." She turned to him, her voice soft and steady. "No, Michael. You reminded me that good people still exist, that kindness can rewrite even the hardest stories." As the sun dipped low, the three of them stood together, not as a businessman, a widow, and a poor boy, but as something stronger. A family born not of perfection but of mercy, forgiveness, and grace itself. The camera of life would have lingered there, on their joined hands, their quiet smiles and the bouquet Grace held up to the fading sky. Because sometimes, the greatest miracles don't come from wealth or fate, but from the courage to love again after loss. Kindness costs nothing, yet it can heal everything. One act of compassion can rewrite an entire life and turn strangers into family.